Welcome to this new season of Ask Stago, the podcast dedicated to provide expert answers to your expert questions in hemostasis. I am Anne-Cécile Ortega, and I am very glad to be joining you today. I'm also delighted to welcome my co-host, Lisa Gannon, Global Product Line Manager at Stago. You are so welcome, Lisa.
Hello, Anne-Cécile. Hi, everyone listening.
So, Lisa, today we are diving into our second episode of Season 5. And for today's subject, our guest, Joseph Bautista, joins us to share with us his life with a rare clotting disorder. So it's a Factor 11 disorder here. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today to share your life journey with all our listeners.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So, Joe, to start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I am 37 years old. I'm currently a data architect working in IT. Started off in the military, joining when I was 18, and I did that. I was an intelligence officer. I did that until 2016, left, worked on my master's, and then moved over to the IT career field.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit about the circumstances of your diagnosis then?
Of course, yeah. So I was diagnosed in my early 20s. I didn't have any real symptoms up until that point. I was having my wisdom teeth removed, and my brother, who's 8 years younger than me, had previously had an operation, and they tested his factor levels in advance of that and found that he had a Factor 11 deficiency. So before I had my wisdom teeth pulled, they wanted me to have my factor levels checked. And I went in and had the blood test done and found that I had a Factor 11 deficiency. I don't recall what the number is off the top of my head, but my factor level isn't too severe. So it's not life-threatening. I don't have some of the complications that other people have, but I do have that deficiency, which impacts any potential medical procedures or has complications for injuries.
So if I understand, you don't have a lifelong medication, but you have a medication in case of injury. Is that the case?
So, yeah, there is no lifelong medication for me. I'm not sure what medications are available in other countries. I know that here in the U.S., with our healthcare system and the insurance being what it is, it's difficult to get some of the medications that may be available. So for me, I do have tranexamic acid that was prescribed to me by my hematologist. And I was told that kind of helps the clots that my body does form remain in place. So if I know that I'm going to be having some kind of minor procedure, I take that up to 24 hours in advance and continue through about 3 to 5 days afterwards to help maintain those clots. But for unexpected things like injuries, it's a reactionary treatment.
And something which is very important for our listeners is what would you like to share with any patient going through a diagnosis of that kind? Something that you had to learn the hard way and you would like them to have the easy way.
Yeah, definitely. So with this disorder specifically and other, I guess, rare disorders in general, the biggest thing that I learned was that I need to be knowledgeable about it, and I need to be my own advocate when it comes to healthcare situations. That's a lesson that I learned a very difficult way when I had an injury back in 2020. I was remodeling my bathroom, and I had a mirror fall off the wall, break in half, and hit me. And I had to apply pressure, a tourniquet, elevate the limb, call 911, and had to go in and get treated for that. And I found at the hospital that none of the healthcare professionals that I saw knew what hemophilia was in general, and none of them had even heard of a Factor 11 deficiency. So it's very important to understand your disease, the symptoms, the treatments for it, and to be able to explain that treatment plan to any healthcare professionals that you may encounter who aren't familiar with you and your disease specifically.
Yeah. And then, obviously then a lot of our audience are medical professionals, Joe. So what knowledge would you want to impart to them? I mean, what would be really helpful for you going through this process for them to be aware of?
Yeah, so for this one specifically, I guess for bleeding disorders in general, I would say that the most important thing that I could, the most important advice I could give to a healthcare professional is if you're not familiar with the specific thing that you're encountering, like the factor 11 specifically, you probably aren't. You probably haven't had a patient with that in the past. It's important to research that. I understand that in cases of like a wound or something, you have to immediately treat the wound, stop the bleeding. But when it's no longer like a critical situation, take the time to look up the disease, look up the treatments for it, and make sure that you're not accidentally doing something that's contrary to the treatment for that disease. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when I had the mirror fall on me, I had internal and external stitches. I was not given FFP for the bleed to get the clotting under control. I had the wound glued shut. They couldn't get it stopped entirely, so they glued the wound shut to try to fix it that way. And I had swelling after the fact, and I went in the next day back to the ER to show them that my arm was starting to swell up, and I was told that was normal from a wound. I didn't think it was normal, and I decided to continue monitoring it. And after 2 days, it kept on growing, and it was going down towards my hand. My wrist was swelling up. Towards my elbow was swelling up. So I ended up calling my brother's hematologist, explaining what happened. They had me come into the hematology center there. And within a second of looking at my arm, the hematologist said that I was going to be admitted to the hospital because it wasn't just swelling from a wound. It was internal bleeding. So I had to spend another 3 days in the hospital getting FFP and tranexamic acid treatments to get the internal bleeding to stop. And my hematologist was pretty upset about the fact that it had been glued shut, because if it hadn't been, it would have been very obvious the bleeding was not under control. But the fact that it was glued shut and the bleeding was all internalized made it difficult for me to understand what was going on, and apparently for the healthcare professionals also to know what was going on.
Yeah, and very good. And Joe, I mean, I suppose finally, what has been, the impact on your life on a day-to-day basis? Because, you're a young guy. Does it impact you, like playing sport, going about your daily business outside of specific injury scenarios? What is the impact there?
So, no, it didn't really have a direct impact on my day-to-day life. It should have, but it didn't. And I guess this is another thing that...
and that would be really reassuring for some of the patients who are going through this.
Yeah, for factor 11 in general, it's kind of deceptive, though, because I say it doesn't have a big direct impact on your day-to-day life. So that can make you complacent with it. And it can make you think that it's not a big deal, and it isn't until it is. So
yes, I know.
So that's why you want to make sure that you understand it, that you don't just disregard it thinking, okay, well, it's not really going to affect me very often, because when it does affect you, it's life-threatening. I used to be in the military. I joined when I was 18, like I said, and I knew that a diagnosis like this would lead to a medical discharge. So I didn't say anything. I ended up deploying to Iraq, deploying to Afghanistan, and when I finally met with a hematologist after the mirror incident in 2020, and my hematologist asked me about my background. I told her about my military experience. She was appalled. And she said, you went to Iraq and Afghanistan with this. And she said, if you had been wounded, well, you very well could have died. Yeah. And I know that's the case, but since this doesn't have a direct impact on the day-to-day life, I was just very complacent with it. Didn't think it was a big deal. Now I know better. Now that I've actually had a wound that was complicated by this, in 2020. And then I also had a minor surgery to remove a cyst in 2021 or 2022 that also resulted in a bleed. So now that I've had 2 instances of this, I understand not to be complacent with it just because it doesn't impact me every day. So you have to find a balance. You have to, not stress about it, not let it impact your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, but to also be prepared to take care of it and advocate for yourself when something does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pity, let's say, that information was not readily available for you to avoid you learning the hard lessons yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I find that factor 11 specifically is very unknown, even in the medical community that I've interacted with. Other hemophilia patients also, like A and B patients, don't even know that hemophilia C exists. In fact, I have a card that I keep in my wallet that shows the contact information from my hematologist, what my factor deficiency is and the treatment for that. And there's a box to check for hemophilia A and hemophilia B. There is no hemophilia C box. So they just had to write it on there and make it up.
Yeah. So which shows the lack of awareness there.
Yes.
I think this is very interesting, and I'm sure it's gonna have a larger audience because this is really the type of necessary knowledge that should be shared within the scientific community and the healthcare people, and also among the patients as to what they can be waiting for, what they can expect, and also what should they be prepared for, if they are from the healthcare system. Is there something that you would like to add for us? Something important that we haven't talked about?
I think that the only thing I'd like to add is, so I know most of your listeners are in healthcare. My experience as a patient going through the healthcare system and encountering pretty much everyone who didn't have any knowledge of factor 11 specifically, or even hemophilia in general, was not just frustrating, it was discouraging, and also made me lose confidence in the people who were treating me. So when I go into a situation, or when any patient goes into a situation where they're facing a life-threatening incident, and the people who are treating them don't know what it is, don't know how to treat it, and then also don't take the time to look it up before treating or even after treating, it makes you lose faith in them and their ability to treat you and their ability to care for you. So even if you don't know what the disease is specifically or what the treatments are for it, you do your best to take care of the bleed as it happens, but then take the time to look it up and find out what the long-term treatment is, or contact a hematologist, just demonstrating that you are looking it up and that you care enough about the patient and about the disease to find out what you don't know really bolsters that trust and that feeling that they're going to be able to competently take care of you.
Which is the minimum really we would expect of our medical professionals.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's a bare minimum. Yeah.
So thank you, Joe. And thank you all for listening too. As usual, all literature sources and links to previous podcasts are linked in the podcast description box. And please do send us any questions that you may have to our email, ask@stago.com. See you next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Stago. Diagnostics is in our blood.